get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm your host, Tony Stewart, and today I'm joined by Melissa Joy. Melissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tony. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. I'm a huge fan of your podcast and the work you're doing, so excited to be able to share with my audience. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story, and how did it lead to launching the Women's Money Wisdom podcast?
Well, I'll start at the end, which is today I run a registered investment advisor firm with about 325 million in assets, working with about 300 families. And the Women's Money Wisdom podcast is a communication tool that I use to spread and amplify the messages that I know are so important to my clients to larger audiences, because I know, the work that we do is often one-on-one, but I know so many people need to hear and learn and talk about money. I personally just stumbled into a career in wealth management and financial planning. I happened to answer one ad at a financial planning company 25 plus years ago. And so really didn't have a lot of my own personal financial literacy when I found this wonderful business many moons ago. And so as my career blossomed, I realized the power of communication in an authentic voice when it comes to money, something that often has been missing in our profession because it kind of came out of bank channels and more, stuffy institutions. So real voices are very resonant for people that are wanting to learn more about finance, but also something that is often missing. And so that is kind of the component of what launched the Women's Money Wisdom podcast almost 6 years ago. And the topics are endless. We have had weekly episodes, more than 300 at this point. And it's just so much fun to be able to talk about things that I think other people will find interesting, and I enjoy talking about myself.
That's great. You said a couple things there that I think are important, especially going forward, the power of communication. We talk a lot about AI, and, my thought is that, communication is something that's going to make the difference for human advisors, as well as you mentioned authenticity. Are you finding, do you feel that communication is going to be a key to success with AI?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that the AI needs some communication training, but also it's a helper because being careful about how you communicate and keeping up with the times. There's different voices you can have, and even thinking about, AI asking you, do you want this to be business or authoritative or personable? I tend to defer in all of my life to more personable. But I think communication is so important. That's a skill that we're taught less and less. I'm a parent of tweens and teens, and just being like, hey, can you make eye contact with the person you're talking to? Or we're not only texting in the real world. Sometimes you need to pick up the phone or go talk to someone in person. I think that, as the world gets more digital, the value for human connection, which is, fundamentally communication as a part of connection, becomes increasingly, more rare, but also more valuable.
I love that it becomes more valuable. Let's talk about authenticity for a minute, because it had its moment, as sort of a word that everybody was saying, being authentic. I think that
Mm.
that's also something important, when we talk about, being ourselves. I think that resonates for clients. Do you find that that's also something that, one will help us, you know, continue to thrive in the age of AI, but that you would recommend to other advisors?
Well, let me give you a little bit of a background on why my company, Pearl Planning, has our kind of foundational value is courageous authenticity. The reality for me is I was a partner at another firm, and the partnership kind of fell apart. And So when I was going through a very vulnerable moment in time when I started Pearl Planning, and I realized that I really wanted to start a company where I could be real about that and real about the moments in life where there's vulnerability, weakness, etc. And that was a risk because that was 7 years ago, and it's not always, especially as a woman, you're not encouraged necessarily to like show the real sometimes. And so um, that value though has been so endearing, and I hear clients who approach me who may have listened to our podcast or spent a lot of time researching the company on our website, talk about how they feel that we're relatable. And I think that courageous authenticity is probably a is you could use a synonym would be like being relatable. And it's been so important in building a business that is built on relationships and relations, not transactions. And so, yes, it's a buzzword. And just like a quick anecdote, we did a value review as a company a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to democratize access to like what does this company mean for everybody, and actually like kind of public vote of team members. We did a big refresh and changed our values, and authenticity fell off. And in our leadership team over the last 6 months, everybody said, I really miss courageous authenticity as being part of our values in this brand refresh from something that, initially it was just my values basically. And so we've added it back. And I think it just feels really true to us to say, hey, you don't need to be perfect when you come into our office as a client. We are also aren't perfect. We have low moments and high moments. And oftentimes when people initially start working with a financial planner, they're in a very vulnerable, difficult moment in time. And so that courageous authenticity, the willingness to talk about not only what's great or what you have a lot of confidence in, but also where you feel weakness, concern, threats or difficulty has really helped us in messaging, but also in the way we practice.
That's so interesting. Is I saw a recent study from Intuit that was talking about people that turn to like ChatGPT for financial
Mm,
advice, and that was one of the things that they were saying is that ChatGPT or people are turning to ChatGPT because they don't feel any judgment or shame when
yeah.
they're going to AI because AI is, maybe it's judging them. I don't know, but
Well,
I
they
don't think
often
so.
say, like, that is a good question, and then, go into the answer or something like that when it's talking back to you.
Yeah, well, I love it because ChatGPT does tell me I'm the smartest person and I have the best ideas. It's like
Yes.
it's like a participation trophy every time you work with it.
It's
But
like woe begone, where everybody is a little bit above average, right?
exactly. But I think, to your point, is I think that's an important thing that we need to make sure our clients feel and the people that we work with is that you don't have to be perfect. You have to be open, and to get back to authenticity is clients also need to be authentic because I've noticed that sometimes too, is that clients feel like they can't be open and honest. And so they tell you what they think you want to hear as an advisor, and that can be challenging. Do you recommend to your clients that they practice courageous authenticity? I mean, not saying those words, but doing that in
Yeah,
action.
I mean, since a lot of the people many of the people I work with are families where there's partners, often male, female partners, but sometimes the female breadwinner is, kind of instigating, like, hey, why don't we talk to these people? And some people will say, I feel I'm very confident in the rest of my life, and I feel like in my current financial professional engagement, I'm being spoken down to, or um, maybe they're only focusing on one person in the room who's more engaged. And so definitely, being relatable and authentic works both ways. But I'll tell people when they work with me, you don't need to have a good hair day when you come into the office. You don't need to dress up to show up. And hopefully that also relates to how you talk about what's going on in your money life. And I really work hard on not judging people because, things that I value in terms of expenditure may be completely different than other people. And that's okay. That's what makes us who we are, And so if you're not impairing your, kind of financial outcomes and your financial safety and the possibilities for the goals that you have longer term, I really work hard to not, say, oh, I wouldn't choose to buy a very expensive car versus, I might choose to buy a handbag or wardrobe that would be more expensive than somebody else. So, if you can remove that judgment and realize that as a fiduciary practitioner, that there's not a place for you to judge how people spend, I think that people can see that in the way that you relate to them and be a listener to what's important to people. These are some of the things that I really work hard to do. I want my clients to know that both their, accounts are being seen by me, but their personal purpose and goals are also, kind of resonant and important to me and my team as we're providing advice to them.
Yeah, well, you said so much in there that's just so valuable. I think one of the takeaways for me is the removing judgment on the choices your clients make.
Hmm.
That can be very difficult as an advisor. And it was something I often struggle with. Like, why are you doing that? That makes no sense at all. But, they had their reasons. And whether they were good reasons or bad reasons, it was their reasons. And, I learned a long time ago is, you can't talk somebody out of something that they're really tied into. You can give them more information and help them rethink their decision making. But I think that's so important is to not judge your clients or other people in your life. Judge your spouse or partner on the decisions that
Hmm.
they make. That's such an important point. So, one of the things is, and you've started to get to this, is the differences for men and women when it comes to money. What is different for women when it comes to money?
Oh, well, if you look at, kind of studies, women may be more, and this is large cohorts. So what I recognize is that in many ways we aren't different. And actually, one of my crusades that's like kind of a modern times crusade is just because, for example, I have a podcast that is focused on women doesn't mean I only want to that I only have advice that's good for women. In fact, I work with many men who also appreciate our advice. And shockingly, because I think a lot of podcast consumers are men, a lot of men listen to my episodes, even though, there's hey, this is for women right on the title. And I love that. I love the great feedback that I get from all listeners. But if you look at studies about women as groups, we may be more careful with our money decisions. Some of the things that we've learned about in women's careers where there's an imposter syndrome, maybe closer to the surface when it comes to women, where because they don't know everything about money, they feel like they maybe know less or aren't doing a good job. So there might be a little bit more insecurity. Women are traditionally actually very good investors because they tend to not overdo risk, also have less frequent trading, which, studies would show that kind of long holding periods or less high frequency trading can sometimes be additive to investment strategies. There are very few women in the asset management industry, but studies show that women decision makers in professional investment management also have good track records. And so I think that there's culturally, though, in many households didn't talk about money at all, men or women, but even fewer talked to the women in the household about money, even as recently as one or two generations ago, because there was kind of an assumption in many cases that women would kind of major in MRS and get married, and then there would be, maybe they would handle the household expenses, but there would be someone else handling the investment expenses or, like the plan for retirement through a pension back in the day. And so we just don't have a culture where there's as many places and spaces to talk confidently about money, which is one of the reasons I care so much about having, kind of a personal financial literacy outlet that's available to women, especially.
Yeah, well, that's, oh gosh, again, so much there. I think one of the things I've heard of studies where it does show that women tend to be better investors exactly for the reasons you state. And there aren't as many outlets for women to invest. I want to give a shout out to there's a nonprofit called Invest for Better, which has investment circles for women.
Mm.
I will reference my episode with the founder, Janine Furbo, in the show notes for everybody watching and listening. But if you're a woman and you want to join an investing circle, it's a great place to do so and to join with other women and to learn about investing and to invest uh, as part of a group if you want to. So just want to share that, Melissa, as you
That's
talk about that.
great.
So it's a great organization. And I want to go back to what you mentioned about imposter syndrome, because I think it goes back to what we were talking about with authenticity,
Hmm.
is that, you know, it is a male dominated field. I mean, less than 30% of CFPs are women. Um, you look at, the financial services as a whole. I've been involved with quite a few fintechs as an advisor, and that is a very male dominated field. And, it's challenging because women don't have a voice at the leadership table. They're underrepresented, might be a better way to put it. And so I think that's something that needs to change.
Hmm.
But part of it is that imposter syndrome that women need to, realize that they do belong and that they can belong. So what you're doing, I think, is so important.
Well, I'll tell you that when I first started in this profession, and I told you kind of stumbled into it, I got the opportunity to kind of climb a ladder in the first stage of my career doing investment research. And I was working for a wealth management firm that the planners had done their own research, and then it was like, oh, we have enough work to do. So Melissa seems like she can, has some critical thinking skills. Maybe she can do that. And so it's even more male dominated in the more investment focused area. And this was, 25 years ago. So there was even more sense of like, so I'm a distinct minority in the room. And what I found was when you can flip it and say this is an advantage instead of a disadvantage. I mean, I'm not saying to be Pollyanna all the time, but women really are a valuable resource in an organization. When I was sitting in rooms where less than 5% of the people in the room were women and or under the age of 40 back in the day, I found that if I asked a question, even if it was a pretty basic question, but maybe everybody else was afraid to raise their hands and ask because maybe they were so seasoned that they shouldn't, they should know. People, if I sounded halfway confident, like everybody remembered me. Oh, that young woman has asked a question, and they wanted to help me. They wanted to learn more about me, so I was able to build an extraordinary network from those back and forths of me doing kind of young, maybe more modern research back in the at the time. And so I would ask those that are curious about the profession to consider that you have valuable resources and perspective. I think a lot of people nowadays have been like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of women that need investment advice. I need to find women. And, so there's a lot of people looking for female talent. Although, the flip side is also maybe our, kind of the way we do things. Like I know I've known women who really didn't get paid at all during maternity leaves if they were or were expected to return to work within a week or two after having a baby. Like there's different considerations that I think are collective professions, whether it's fintech, wealth management, et cetera, need to really make sure they're accommodating women. But I think everybody realizes that having that gap leaves a gap in is a lost business opportunity if we continue to leave women in the minority.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I know that a lot of women are getting their financial advice, if you want to call it that, from outside the traditional financial services. There are some women financial creators who have very large followings in the hundreds of
Mhm.
thousands, um, who are not mainstream,
Yes.
and are filling the gap that we as a traditional industry have not met. So it's happening, and the question is whether we can pivot as an industry to meet that need. And as you put it, just to go back, is women are just as good, or if not better than men. Women are oftentimes more focused on the goals and what they want to achieve than the actual products. I know in a lot of meetings where I had is that the women would ask more of the question like, okay, where are we going? Is this going to meet the goals? And the man would say, like, well, is this the most cost-effective product? And it's like, well, that's not
Mhm.
really the best question to start with. What are you actually trying to achieve? And I think that's the flip side.
I'm completely stereotyping, so know that this is a generalization, but in some cases, I see women who really are making great decisions that need to be assured that that there's a big portion of what they've already been doing that is very effective and they're doing a good job. And then also sometimes with newer clients that are male, they may come into the room and want to like not be judged. And it really is just a different version of the same insecurity, but so that, they'll come in really with a lot of bravado about how well they're doing and how they're making all the right decisions. And I think one area that is a little bit easier to learn on the job, and to research and understand is investing. It's changed where there used to be kind of some you needed a professional to execute on some investments, and that's become much more approachable for everyone. It's a lot easier to do in the age of Robinhood and Betterment and things like that. And so they'll come in hot, like, I'm super smart, so just know, like, you don't need to question anything going on here, there. And, there's more levels of complexity for people that are successful and accumulating real wealth that may not be explored because those aren't on, kind of the personal finance articles on the Boglehead forums and things like that. So sometimes, I'm boosting up the confidence of the woman in the room, and I'm also like, affirming like, hey, yeah, you're super sharp. I can see that you have a lot of personal financial literacy and understanding of investment markets, but there may be some unexplored areas that are blind spots. And if we can have some space to talk about those, I'd love to explore it with you. But, if it's just like, no, I got this figured out, but she dragged me to the meeting, we're never going to get there. So, lots of nuances when it comes to um, women being from Mars and men from Venus. But I also, and this is like a chat GPT thing, if you'll allow me to digress, I don't want women to be put in a corner where they're always women investors. Women are just investors, just like men and financial deciders. And it's interesting. I like, for example, when I use great investment quotes, which, there's some amazing quotes over the years. If you put in, tell me, some of the best investment quotes of all time, you're going to get a list in ChatGPT or Gemini or wherever you're searching, just like it always was when you did a Google search or a Yahoo search, a bunch of great quotes by men. And like they're fantastic things that I've learned on. And then you can say, hey, can you give me some quotes that women said about investing? Notice I didn't say about women investing. And every single quote that comes back to you is going to be a quote about being a women investor. So I think even in our algorithms and the way the chats are being trained, there's a difference between investing, which everybody should read what the men say, and women's voices in investing, which are put into a much smaller sphere and corner just for women. And so that's something that I'm kind of pushing back against while also not discontinuing my conversations for women, of just saying, like, we need to be careful about identifying voices and realizing that women's voices are for everyone, just like men's voices are.
I think that's so important, and that's why I love your podcast is because there's not as many places that are spotlighting women's voices, and that's something I'm trying to do on this show
I see
by
it.
having on a lot of uh, women because it's like, you know, I don't get it is for me is like, and also the topic comes up, you know, and that's going to be my next question for you is like, how do you talk to women? And I've heard that from a lot of male advisors, and it's like, well, wait a minute, you know, you have a mom, so you've probably talked to your mom. You know, you may have sisters, you may have female coworkers, whatever, but you know, or a partner, so it's like you know how to talk to women, but what kind of advice would you give to a male financial planner who's like, okay, well, I don't really feel comfortable, you know, I do want to include the spouse, I do want to talk to her to, you know, make sure that the spouse is being included at the same level as the male.
I think, oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. One of the things is there's kind of an assumption. I find like every family I work with where there's two decision makers, there may be somebody coming in stronger in terms of their interest in finance, confidence, etc. But you've really got to suss out where they're coming from, um, so that you understand better who you're dealing with and where they want to have their needs met. In some cases, the woman may be more technically proficient and interested in the nuts and bolts of, different considerations. But, bringing the other person into the conversation, taking a pause and saying, is there anything you have questions on? Um, Honoring, the person that perhaps is more dominant in the conversation, but also leaving space for the other person. And just being relatable. I think having um, having a team that understands that it's not just when you just got out of a session talking about how both decision makers need to be seen and heard, um, really is important. This is one of the reasons, and this might be controversial, why I tend to shy away from like professionally oriented niches, like, oh, I work with doctors or I work with engineers, because in many cases that necessitates that you're really overly focused on one member of the family. And so not that I'm against it, but I hope that I also hear from you that you're honoring the other person in the room and wherever they may be, because there's very few financial engagements where people have partners where both people don't need to be heard. So a lot of interesting things to think about, but I guess it kind of goes back to that authenticity and vulnerability to say, you might say like, hey, I haven't felt as relatable to him, her, whoever's in the room, groups of people. How can I be more relatable to those people and ask, friends in the profession or listen to podcasts like this?
Yeah, no, I love that. And, you know, the stats show that, you know, a huge number of widows, a significant percentage of widows and divorcees will leave their current financial planner. And usually the answer is just as simple as that they didn't feel seen or heard by their current
Hmm.
financial planner, that it's, you know, I mean, there are more complexities to it. And as you said earlier, you know, that we can, you know, stereotype, but, you know, but there are these trends overall that come into play. So, you know, before we start to wrap up, I did have one other question because I think this is really important, especially for women, is how can women find balance, you know, when they're carrying the additional weight of caregiving, you know, either
Mm.
for their children or for those of us who are in the sandwich generation where we also have aging parents, because usually caregiving does fall primarily on the woman.
Oh my gosh, I love this topic. I hope that I will launch in 2026 a project that really speaks to this. And I want to call it the messy money middle, because I just turned 50. I'm a Gen Xer, and many of my clients are similar age cohort. And I just think like culturally, we had one way to explain, the midlife crisis for our parents, or the baby boomers, and it's not enough. And so, whether it's exploring the challenges of caregiving, exploring medical diagnoses that we're experiencing ourselves or our partners are, raising children and realizing that like it's really hard when they're little, but it's still hard when they're tweens and teens or young adults. Um, Thinking if you're child free about who will take care of me someday. Career changes, being disrupted by AI. There's just so much to be prepared for, that we are not adequately addressing in our broader culture, but also in the world of wealth management and financial planning. And so, a couple of things that I've already kind of hit on. One would be that, if you can simplify as many things that don't need to be complex as possible, that can really help you out because you need space to deal with the complexity, and it's often difficult to predict. Um, where what's going to blindside you, whether it's care for parents or a kid with an extra needs or challenges or both, or if you're a woman in your 40s or 50s. We did not receive a lot of proactive education on menopause. So keep it simple where you can, and that's one of the things I really work on with clients is like how to reduce costs, how to get organized, how to have fewer accounts if that's appropriate, how to not, buy complexity where you don't need to. Rely on talented, specialized professional advice when you can. So, if you need to become a caregiver, how can you ease the burden? Whether it's with mental health counseling or, somebody who is a concierge to assess the care needs of a family member, or getting extra help in the household. If you have the means to pay to address some of your lost time and resources, I think that's valuable. I certainly, I'm biased, but I think wealth managers have a role to play in that, if trained right. But also, and this is something, stay connected both within the community of your needs, but also with others. And so, in that, I think so many, kind of midlife challenges put you in a box, just like I've been talking about before, where you're disconnecting from others that might not have the same situation. It might be your spouse if you have, you're a caregiver and they aren't, or, for a member of your family, or it might be women from men when it comes to like understanding menopause. And I really want us to collectively be having those conversations. So it's not just women learning about the challenges of caregiving. We're talking about it with men and women. And so that we're all prepared to understand some of the burdens that our spouse might take on if their family, has identified them, if they have identified themselves or their family has identified them to care for aging parents. And I really want to continue to research and explore this area because like I said, I don't think there's so many areas where we are proactive, but this like life's bumps in the road in middle age is one where there just is not a script that everybody is being prepared for. And so many times you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I wake up in this? What fresh hell is this? And how do I, it's very reactive instead of kind of setting up your house to be prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Actually, I did an episode with someone, and the name is escaping me right now, but oh, Carol Chang, who talks about that, is setting up your home early, for solo aging or, aging as a
Hmm.
couple, that, do it in advance, not when you need to do it. Is like you said, don't be reactive with that. And that's such important advice. And I think the other thing too is you're alluding to is there's going to be more aging people and there's going to be
Mm.
more caregiving needs. So thinking about that, because it's not always the best plan to say, hey, my adult kids are going to do the caregiving. That's
That
not.
might not be their plan. And, one of the things I just was talking to someone who had an unexpected layoff, and anecdotally, we're seeing that more and more in our practice for, really highly valued professionals. And, I told her, like, being on top of your financial planning. She had a goal of, and her spouse had a goal of retiring early. And you know what? Having your ducks in a row when it comes to your finances only helps you to be more prepared for any sort of challenge. So, doing being proactive on other financial considerations really can help you out to when things come that you didn't see coming.
Yeah, I love that. That's, a project that I'm working on is sort of a template to help people be prepared for life's major what ifs.
I
Just,
love
it's going to be a
that.
fillable template because it's like, it came to me because, my wife and I did our estate planning when our son turned 18, and
Hmm.
part of our homework was to do a letter of instruction. I'm like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really fill in everything. And so, because of that context of creating a plan, because there's a lot of different things that can happen in your legal documents, which are super important and super critical, don't say everything
There's a
that
lot
you
of
need.
legalese in those. And I agree. Like I tell people sometimes, or like maybe you maybe you have something you're not willing to share with your kids about how you've set up your estate plan. Maybe it's a surprise person who's in charge, or one kid's getting more than another or something. Like leave a letter so that it's not, based the attorney's not going to care about explaining it. And I love that, like, kind of catastrophizing. What if something awful happened this way or that way? How would you be okay? And in many, many cases, you have resources to deal. But we just don't, it's an uncomfortable conversation that we do not prepare each other for as well as we should.
Definitely. When it is so important to have those conversations. So to wrap up, I have what are called the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions I ask all of my guests. The first one is, what is one money myth you're trying to break?
We've talked about it today. I think women are terrific when it comes to money. And so I'm just trying to break the myth that you need to be scared or, defeated when it comes to money conversations and make people feel more confident and comfortable, when it comes to both discussions as well as financial decisions.
Awesome. Awesome. Great advice. The next question is, Melissa, let's get out the time machine for a minute. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, one regret is, and I don't know what I would change, so I'd have to think about that more, but um, I feel like in my 20s, I didn't have much money and resources, but you have all the time in the world. And so part of me wishes that I had a few more experiences before I, had family and a business to take care of. It's interesting because nowadays we're like, oh, this generation of kids can't buy a house. They can't afford to buy a house, but many of them have been to more continents than we have and have a better retirement game plan than we have. So I think maybe they're valuing some of those experiences and time a little bit more than I was. And I can't go and do it over, but I advocate for people getting experiences in earlier.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard that from a lot of people who, from the FIRE community, financial
Mm,
independence, retire early, that they regret living that way for so long because they didn't get to do a lot of experiences. So,
yeah.
it's finding a balance of doing both. So, last question is, what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about money?
Well, I think we live in a world that focuses on, in many ways, on either scarcity. You were just mentioning the fire community, where it's like live on the least possible so you can retire the earliest, or abundance. And you look at your, reels on Instagram or TikTok, and it's just like, oh, look at my jet. You look, I just unboxed this, Hermes purse, or it's a lot of consumption and stuff. And I think there's some place in between, that is all about contentment. And more stuff in your life may bring you joy or may mean nothing to you, but you're getting signals everywhere that you need it. And conversely, living in fear where you just are constantly worried about running out of money. Um, Gosh, I just feel like it's probably taking years off your life. It's so stressful to just be in constant fear. And so finding that middle place where you can think about contentment and you can understand that, yes, you do, this is what's enough for you. This is a life that brings you joy. And you don't need everything, but there are certain things that are really critical and valuable. That's what I want us to talk about more. And that's what I want to be seeking for clients is help in even this is one of my goals for 2026 is to edit. So I'm doing actually a little less and I'm committing to a little less, but I'm doing the things that I value better and there's more space and time to enjoy them. So that's what I would the tip I would give is to seek contentment over scarcity or abundance.
Ooh, I love that. I need to make sure I get that in the show notes for everybody watching and listening. Um, so I love that. And the thinking about what's enough, because like you said, is we're so often thinking about what everybody else has or is doing. We're not thinking about what's right for us and what brings us personal joy. So,
Mm.
Melissa, where can people learn more about you, your firm, and tune into the Women's Money Wisdom podcast?
So I would love, you can easily find the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. It's just all one word, womensmoneywisdom.com. Like and subscribe on the major podcast places like Apple and Spotify. We're also on YouTube under Pearl Planning Financial. And you can find all of my podcast videos as well as webinars and things like that there. On social media, you can find me, Melissa Joy CFP, at LinkedIn. I'm on there frequently, as well as Facebook and Instagram are Pearl Planning Financial. And then our website is pearlplanning.com. Yeah, that's a lot of places to find me. I welcome people to reach out if you have a podcast idea or if you're curious about learning more about financial planning, you can easily find me on any of those platforms.
Awesome, awesome. And for everybody watching and listening, there will be links to all of those things that Melissa mentioned. So if you have access to the show notes, you can go to the show notes and find all those links. Melissa, thanks for joining me today on the Get Ready Before Life Happens podcast.
Thanks for having me and doing what you do, Tony. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you as well. Is your podcast is amazing. So I urge everyone to go out and check out the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to like and to subscribe. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement and get access to my free toolkit of resources and worksheets. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.